Public sector employee with questionable bosses. I apologize in advance for being vague intentionally so. I do need to get this off my chest somehow. I do need to protect myself and my loved ones from any potential retaliation, even if that means leaving certain details out. I do want to give hope to those opposing despotic structures in the private and public sectors, but that may require a slight reading between the lines. Fresh out of college, I found employment in a field which broadly matched my field of study and of interest. I viewed it as a reasonable stepping stone to one or more of the career paths that actually suited me. The pay wasn't excellent, but the benefits were reasonable and the structure was transparent. My employer was, in an ultimate sense, the national government of my country. I'll spare details as to who it was in a more immediate sense. Though somewhat dismayed that my work was more clerical than what I actually wanted to be doing, I very much enjoyed the mutual respect and collaboration between coworkers and our immediate superiors. Suffice to say, everyone in our little cul-de-sac was more progressive than the median citizen of, and far more than the governing party. We got various signals that we were not long for this job. If you know, you know. We got conflicting advice on how to respond to certain emails which, in varying degrees of explicitness, brought the Damocletian sort of termination over our necks. I wasn't willing to go out without some resistance. My coworkers were way ahead of me. Some people are tragically forced to comply with authoritarianism. We were gifted with the opportunity and ability to at the very least not pre-comply with authoritarianism, or inasmuch compliance was rendered, it was malicious, noting the real malice was from the people who caused the need for resistance. A series of capricious and mendacious directives came down all the way from the top to our humble little unit. One had to do with the removal of references to certain ideas, institutions, movements, and persons which the governing party tried to scapegoat in recent years. You can see where I am going with this. Our immediate soup fired the first volley. A request was made to authorize a change to a small section of a public-facing website in compliance with the directive in question. Names, images, and details regarding certain popular figures were removed. Our SV explained that no one had to do any of this if they didn't want to, and that it was indeed disgusting. But better for it to happen strategically if it is to happen anyway. After some discussion, we all agreed, begrudgingly. If you're a bit confused, that's fair. It was a confusing time for all involved, and still is. If there is a divine force, I hope it is with those still stuck under those circumstances. The base of the governing party, while not the most enlightened, still largely has a positive view of certain figures whom said base thinks deservedly, and at long last enmesh themselves in the cultural milieu. Think of Russian nationalists who tout Pushkin as proof that Russian imperialism has never been, is not, and never will be racist, if racism even exists. I am not Russian, but hopefully the point was expressed quasi-coherently. So our counterparts in Moscow would remove references to Pushkin first, drawing ire and questions from Putin's base, leaving more complex and controversial figures last. The very people his base are riled up to fear and despise. And so on we went even as our team dwindled. As news stories broke out, we realized we weren't alone as maliciously complaint public sector workers. In some small degree, we helped expose who the authoritarians really are by jumping to what they, in the end, wanted to be done. Oh, by the way, the political appointees above us said nothing. The grapevine relayed that they even saw this as good, which woke more people up to how stupid and wicked they are. I sucked at math. First of all, mobile post. I find this subreddit a few days ago through our /Reddit and have been reading a lot of the posts, which reminded me of my school years. Back in the equivalent of high school in my country, I had a math teacher who really disliked me, which I could understand because I skipped most of her classes and I was pretty smug and cocky. In the end, I skipped so many classes, roughly 1 to 2 months of school per year, and I ended up knowing pretty much nothing about math. It didn't bother me back then because I wasn't trying to pursue a career that would need any of the things taught in the class I've missed. So let's get to the fun part. She really didn't like me and called me and my mother into a lot of conferences, which sometimes included my class teacher and the principal. I was cool with my class teacher because I liked his subject and he knew that I was a smart student, acing his tests even when I was the entire subject for weeks on end and always bringing valuable statements and opinions to his classes. My principal was also a teacher of mine, but disliked me as well. She liked that I was good in school, but hated my smugness about it, as well as MX poor attendance. They tried everything to get me to attend more to school, putting me in easier classes, putting me in harder classes, and trying to lower my grade because of bad attendance. I rarely did my homework, and they tried to make that a bigger part in my grading. But through the way grading worked, I gamed the system, so I didn't have to do much for school. 10 to 15% was homework, 25 to 30% was exams and tests, and the rest was participation in class. They can't punish me for poor participation in class on the days I was absent because I always had a doctor's note. My mom used to be a nurse, an incredible good one with vast amounts of medical knowledge, because it wasn't just her job, it was also her hobby. So due to that, she was hugely popular with the doctors, and whenever me and my brother had anything, we could just come in and get treatment, and, you guessed it, a doctor's note. Because I was very talk active and mostly understood the stuff that was taught during lessons, I always had good participation, asking the right questions, helping peers, and so on. So most of my grade was already set. Homework dragged it down a bit, but not too much. Only thing left to conquer were exams and tests. My math teacher loved the way the state exam at the end of our high school and used it for her tests as well. The way it worked for complex stuff is you read the equation, figure out which formula you needed to use, wrote down the formula without customizing it to the equation, like a equals or squared times pi, wrote down what was given, in this case a or r, and wrote down what you were trying to solve for, in this case the other one. Writing down the correct formula equals 1 point. Writing down what was given equals 1 point. Writing down what you were solving for equals 1 point. Actually doing the math equals 1 point. Getting the correct result equals 1 point. So you can get 3 out of 5 points without calculating anything. This method was used for all tests and even the harder stuff to the end of the year. I got through the easy stuff like the circle formula relatively good with a solid B, sometimes a C, but when the harder stuff started, I was at a loss how to do the actual math. But because we had an extra sheet ETH every single formula we would ever need, I simply figured out which formula to use, wrote everything down and put it in, and never once did a calculation. I ended up getting 3 out of 5 points on everything for a more or less good C. My teacher caught on though, tried to make me stop using this method and actually do some math, threatened to not grade my tests anymore because I didn't actually do any maths and so on. So I said sure, I won't do it again and do some proper, real math. Next test comes around, and I only wrote down stuff like 2 plus 3 is equal to 9 and did a bunch of doodles of graphs and whatnot to pass the time. Obviously got an F for that one. What she forgot though is that the next test was the state exam. It's still graded by her, but the state decides the grading and what is correct and what isn't, so I'm back to my old method. Got a solid C again in the state exam, and due to how the grading was out together, she was left with no other choice than to give me a C. Because my worst subject was only a C now, my high school diploma is really good, only dragged down a little by a C in math. TLDR, I gamed the state grading system, so I wouldn't have a bad diploma.